Hello and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton, and today we're going to talk about one of the cities and frankly the region and most coastal communities' serious problems, which is the risk of flooding. We have new federal flood maps coming out, and people need to get familiar with whether they're in, whether they're out, what their elevations are, and it's all over my head, and so we have an engineer from Public Works here to talk us through it. My guest is Gayle Hicks. Welcome, Gayle.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This stuff is so confusing because of, there's information here, there's information there, there's flood maps for different things, there's hurricane surge zone maps, there's federal flooding maps, and sometimes it's coastal and sometimes it's rainfall and sometimes it's both. So what is this?
It is very confusing, so what I'd like to do is try and simplify it for people. Essentially what you need to know, and this information is currently available on our GIS, on our website, you need to know if you're in the floodplain, and if you are, you're either in an AE zone or a VE zone. That part along the coast that you were talking about is along the Chesapeake Bay shoreline and also with and a little bit of back river. That's an area where there's actually surge involved, and so
where the waves come up.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so those flood elevations are higher.
And what is that? What's that? AE or VE?
That's the VE zone.
VE.
That's
Okay.
VE.
So VE is that coastal surge.
Right. They call it the velocity zone, and the AE is really supposed to be still water. Although in Hampton we have so many different tidal flood bodies that intersect it.
Yeah, most of our
that
creeks
there's
are kind
a little bit of surge
along
the edges of those creeks too.
But that's called AE.
That's called AE.
And AE means, who knows?
Who knows?
Sometimes it doesn't help.
A long time ago,
Okay.
someone decided these were going to be the designations, and when they explain it, they just say AE, that's the place of the 100-year flood or the 1% chance of flooding.
Well, and just for just a second, I know it's a little bit off topic, but 100-year flood doesn't really mean we're only going to get one in 100 years, which we all hope, but we've had two in the past 5 years, I think.
Yeah, we have.
So, but what it means is every year there's a 1% chance. Statistically.
Statistically
measured
speaking.
over a couple thousand years, it might even out.
And so there could be multiple 100-year storms. And in fact, those two storms that you mentioned were summertime storms, and the impact was mostly in the northwest part of town. One was a 200-year storm, and one was a 500-year plus, depending on where you were located.
Yeah, I mean,
we're getting a lot of rain.
You can't predict. And then add to that, the land is sinking, the seawaters are rising, and that's why it has to change. I assume that has a lot to do with the changes in these maps, as people are saying, my home didn't used to flood, and now it floods.
Well, actually what happens on the federal government side, they devoted some funding to this. And it is a coastal remapping for the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic Coast because we're the ones that are most at risk. And we've talked about this before. We do have about 6 inches of sea level rise since 1992. And because of that, when you have a storm on top of that, the impacts are greater. And everybody understands that it is raining longer, and there's a greater quantity of rain that is falling. That's duration and intensity. And because of that, the way that when they redid the model for this flood map, they had to incorporate historical rainfall data that has changed. And I think everybody has observed that those things are changing.
Yeah, I think they want to blame it on something, like maybe it's not real or maybe it's because of development, but we are having more problems.
It's a climate change, whether you agree with how it is actually taking place or not.
Or how quickly or all
exactly.
those different variables.
It is a climate change, and it is recordable, and there are scientists that are working on it every day. And we have to redo the maps accordingly because we have to incorporate the best data that we have at the time.
And so there will be probably more people in flood zones than there used to be. But it's also possible that some properties that used to be, due to new surveys and changes, aren't in the risk or aren't in as big a risk as they were before.
Because one of the things they did was, the first thing they did was fly it, and there's new LiDAR data. And so that'll catch a lot of the changes and elevations that we didn't really have before because we didn't have that great of an accuracy before. But there will always be anomalies. There will always be houses that are built higher than the houses that are in their neighborhood. And that's why there is a letter of map amendment process so that they can, based on real information, remove their structure from the floodplain.
Okay, so what we're talking about then is there are new maps and there are flood maps that determine whether or not we should be getting flood insurance or what our risk is. And that's why the federal government has done them, is that they run the flood insurance program.
Yes, they do.
And Hampton, by the way, does a number of measures, most of which you're in charge of, that reduce the cost. Because we're a community that educates and we have rules about building and we're trying to reduce flooding, it can cut people's cost of flood insurance. There's a discount program.
That's correct. We're in the CRS, the community rating system, and we're an 8, which means our folks are eligible for up to 10% discount on their flood insurance premium. And 10%
and that's huge.
Be huge.
It's a
That's
pretty
correct.
costly program. Now, for most people, we have a mortgage, and the person who holds our mortgage will mandate that we get flood insurance if we're in one of these zones. So that's why it's such a big deal to people. But even some of us who maybe don't live in the zones but are pretty darn close might choose to get flood insurance for peace of mind and things like that. So here's the hard part. We're just going to brush through this. There's a couple of ways that people can find out if their information has changed in the new flood maps, or maybe they haven't looked this up before and need to. Okay. How do we do that?
First thing we're going to do is we're going to have an open house on January the 13th. It's going to be at the Hampton Convention Center from 4 to 8 p.m. And open house, that means you don't have to register. You can come and go as you please. There will be a number of stations set up, and those will be specific areas where you can get information. FEMA's going to be there, FEMA's partners, including the Army Corps and the DCR flooding section. For the state of Virginia, we have a lot of staff people there from 311, IT, Public Works, Community Development, and particularly the Development Services Center. So, and that will give people an opportunity to get a new map made. We'll have a whole section. All they'll do the entire time is make maps.
Walk in and get it done. And it's an open house. People can come in at any time.
Exactly.
It's not you have to sit through a meeting.
You don't sit through a meeting. There is a place, if you want to sit down and get more detail, there will be a room right across from the Ballroom BC, room 201, where they will be running a flood map presentation to describe why we're getting a new map, what was entailed in actually creating that map. That will be ongoing. It's 50 seats. We'll just do that all evening long. But meanwhile, there'll be other stations for hazard mitigation, letters of map amendment, paper maps, the map ID, planning or permitting, a flood ordinance. So you can see there'll be lots of opportunity to talk to the experts. So anyone that can make it should try and make it, because this is an opportunity that we won't get again. FEMA is, they come down once for the open house, that's it. After that, the staff is going to handle all the subsequent requests. And there will be a lot of requests. So we're going to urge people to come to the meeting. We're going to urge them to go to the website. Our website on our GIS currently has the existing map and the preliminary map. They can attach those layers. We've got information on the emergency management webpage where they can actually make the map, the very map that they'll be making at the meeting, which is the risk map.
So what you're saying is really and truly, it's a little easier if you come to the meeting and you can get a different level of information.
That's correct.
But at home in your PJs, if you're computer savvy, you can actually get all this information.
That's correct, and you could get it right now if you wanted to.
And we're going to go ahead, I'm just going to commit to this right now, make a website that is hampton.gov/floodmaps, and it will contain, as you said, there's a couple of different ways you can process the information. And one is sort of that overview map that has your old flood information and your new flood information. One is on the GIS system right now. You can click on the current flood map information, or you can click that off and click on the proposed and print them out and look at the difference. And then the third is the FEMA site, which I found a little harder to get through, but that is the official map you might need to take to your insurance agent. Hopefully your insurance agent can call up the map on their own and know whether what your level is and what you would qualify for if you need flood insurance.
You're exactly correct.
So we're going to make documents that tell people how to do it. We're going to make videos that kind of show it with screenshots in there, and we will help people through this in whatever way is most convenient for them.
That's correct. We'll do everything we can to make sure they have the information that they need to be able to make good decisions and to be able to present that information to their flood insurance agent or their banking institution.
Okay, well, this is one thing. It sounds awful. It's hard to wade through, but wade, haha. But all of us coastal communities are going to face this, and it's probably going to happen every so often. I mean, we're going to get more data, and things are going to change, and that's going to change the projected flood levels. We're going to have to get used to doing this on a fairly regular basis, aren't we?
I think so, but I think and it is a little daunting, but people really need to know what their risk is, so it's important one way or another for them to get the information.
It is. And I'll say, we're calling these the preliminary flood maps, but really, unless someone has technical information that their house is higher than it says on the plot, or you can only appeal if you have a technical problem. So it's not likely that very many of these things are going to change. Most of this is going to get.
This is probably the map that we're going to see that is adopted. Mm-hmm. There are very seldom any technical challenges. But you can always do, even after the map has been adopted, you can always do a letter of map amendment if it turns out that the elevation of your finished floor or your property is a little bit higher than what is actually shown on the map.
Okay. All right, so we've simplified this as much as we can. It's a little daunting, but not too bad. People should be able to walk into your meeting and get what they need and ask questions right there to a human being. But if that's not a convenient night for them to go out, or if they'd rather make their own map from home and get it straight in their brain, they can do that too at hampton.gov/floodmaps.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
And then if they're still stuck, Gayle, we call 311.
Yes, we can call 311. We can actually sign in on a sheet in Development Services Center and get information in about a week.
Okay. So we will help people any way that they're comfortable with it.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. I hope you're ready and can go run to the GIS at hampton.gov/floodmaps. Look it up. I will say postcards went out to about 10,000 people, which means those households are in the new floodplain. Many of them already were, but if you got a postcard in particular, you want to pay attention and look up your address or come to the meeting. Thanks for watching.